Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Ray. I'm your Sunday school teacher, and this is my Sunday school class. Over the last couple of videos, we've been taking a look at how the Bible is constructed. We've been going back to the table of contents. We've been looking at the divisions of the books, the categories, the genres, that kind of thing. And then the last couple, we've been looking at the summaries of the books of the Bible. And I want to let you know that these videos that I do are only segments from the Bible. I just lift out certain customs, words, phrases, ideas, historical, political facts that perhaps lose maybe their full impact, because we tend to look at those things from a definite Western or American mindset instead of an Eastern mindset. So a lot of things change just given that information. And then of course we have thousands of years where the cultures have changed, where different topics mean different things, different words mean different things today than they did back then. So we're just going to take a closer look at those. And I just try to zoom in like this. Yeah, that's scary, isn't it? But I try to zoom in and just lift those things out and try and help make them a little bit more understandable. I don't take anything out of context, and any of the passages that I look at or chapters or whatever, I do encourage you to go and read the passage for yourself. You can do it on the Bible app. You can have the audio feature on Bible app. You can get the Bible on CD or DVD to listen to if you're traveling. You do a lot of road travel, or you can have a print Bible. However you choose to read the Bible, I encourage you to do that, because it's not about me, and I am not trying to deceive you, and everyone has that option and that right and that privilege to be able to read the Bible for themselves. It's important to do this on your own and not just take my word for it, because today's culture, we have so many people who will twist what the Bible has to say into something that it does not say, or they're going to try and convince us that it doesn't say something that it really does say, and we need to be aware of that. The Bible is a standard of living. It is a guiding light, and it's the authoritative word of God. And I hope that you see that as well, and that you go to the Bible for answering life's most challenging questions and looking at what the Bible has to say to you personally. I always like to think of the Bible as a living organism, because no matter how many years I have studied the Bible, and I've been at it for quite a while, I find something new every single time I read through the Bible. So hopefully you'll stick with me, and if you do, I encourage you to hit the like button, share, and if you're on YouTube, same thing, hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and share it with others. And I just encourage you to do that. I'm sorry. So we're going to take a look in just a few moments. We're going to take a look at the next set of Bible book summaries that we're looking at. We're looking at them maybe 5 at a time. There are 66 books, so it's taking us a few videos to get through that. So I encourage you to stick with me, and we'll be right back with those summaries. Okay, we're back, and I have these posted up on the screen for you. We're going to be taking a look at the poetry and wisdom books of the Bible. And these books include hymns or songs. They include Proverbs, which are little quips of wisdom and practical quotes. They include poems. They also include drama, the book of Job especially. These books illustrate the creative ways people of Israel express themselves to God and to each other. It's the worship arts, if you will. So let's take a look at the book of Job. Job is a book that we're pretty much all familiar with, I'm thinking, because it deals with, you hear the phrase, oh, they have the patience of Job, or something similar to that, the patience of Job. Well, why do we think that Job had so much patience? Well, read through the book. There are 42 chapters, and it's very dramatic. As I've said before, I approach Bible study in a journalistic sort of way. So I use 5 W's and an H to help me understand what's going on in the big picture, and then it breaks down into the smaller chunks that we talk about. So I do who, what, where, when, why, and sometimes how. Who? Well, you need to know a little bit something about who is in the book that you're studying. Who wrote the book? Well, the book of Job, we don't know if it was actually a man named Job. And by the way, you pronounce it Job, not Job. So we aren't sure if this is a person who wrote it or somebody else wrote it about Job. But we don't know for sure who the author is. The overall arc of the story, is a story of perseverance. And my goodness, what a story Job has. Where does this take place? Well, it takes place in the ancient land of Mesopotamia, specifically the land of Uz, not Oz, but Uz. Again, there's something unknown about the time frame it's written. Some will say that it's probably the oldest book in the Bible. Don't know that for sure. So when was it written? It's unknown at this time. Why was the book of Job written, and why is it in our Bibles today, and why is it important for us to know about? Well, it's to show the sovereignty of God, especially those last few chapters, and it's to illustrate faithfulness both on the part of Job and then the faithfulness on the part of God. But especially Job illustrates his faithfulness in the midst of suffering. Boy, did he suffer. It's a fascinating story. Let's look at the chapter outlines. Chapters 1 to 3 were introduced to Job. Very interesting introduction, I might add. So in chapters 1 to 3, we see that Job undergoes a serious amount of spiritual testing. A lot of things happen in those chapters. Well, in chapters 4 to 31, we have 3 specific friends of Job. And if you read through this book, you will wonder, like I often wonder, if those were my friends, I'm not sure if I would want anybody else to be my friend like that. So anyway, Job's friends come on the scene, and they have all kinds of advice and all kinds of speculation and really lift him up. I don't think so. And then chapters 32 to 37, there's another speech. There's a long speech given by one of the guys. His name is Elihu. And then God comes to Job in a very personal way. In the last few chapters, chapter 38 to 42, after all of this happens to Job and all of these friends, even his wife got in on the act here, where she says, curse God and die because of all the stuff that happened to him. But after all of that, Job is still faithful, but he has questions. And yet, God is patient with him. God is compassionate toward him, and God gives him an answer. And it's quite an interesting answer. He responds very compassionately, mercifully, gracious. And I think that's a good encouragement, those last few chapters, for anyone that has gone through an extended time of suffering. Job 19, verses 25 and 26, gives us a key verse, or a key passage. And I love the way it begins. It says, I know, this is Job confirming, he's acknowledging. He says, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth, and after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. We're going to pause here, and then we'll go on to the next one. Okay, here we are at the next book. This has been a book that runs the gamut of every emotional event or aspect or outburst. Any and every emotion is expressed somewhere throughout the book of Psalms. Now, a psalm is basically just a poem set to music. We call them today hymns of the church, hymns, songs of praise, songs of worship. So these were poems, and they were put to music. A lot of people wrote these psalms. There are 150 of them. Some of them are very short. One of them is extremely long. So King David is attributed to the majority of these poems. Moses also wrote a few psalms. Asaph, which if you do a lot of study through the Psalms, you'll know that he is a key worship leader under King David, and so he wrote some psalms. King Solomon wrote a few. A man named Ethan, and then there were some others who were priests or Levites called the sons of Korah. There were a couple of them, or two or three, I don't remember. What is this? Well, as I said, it's in the poetry and song genre. Where does this take place? Well, pretty much throughout ancient Israel. And we can kind of attribute the time frame because of some of the historical events that took place. So it covers from 1000 BC, and remember that means before Christ or before the Common Era. We say before Christ. So 1000 BC all the way through approximately 450 BC. Why is the book of Psalms written? Well, how many of you find great comfort in Psalm 23? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Yeah, that's why. Because it's a source of comfort. It's a source of encouragement. It expresses anger. The book of Psalms expresses anger, depression, joy. Like I said, it runs the emotional gamut. So why? It's basically to communicate with God and worship Him through music, through song, through poetry. The outlines of the chapters, traditionally it's divided into 5 separate smaller books because there's so many of them. So book 1 covers Psalm 1 through 41. Book 2 covers Psalms 42 to 72. Book 3, Psalm 73 to 89. Book 4, Psalm 90 to 106. And Book 5, Psalm 107 to 150. And in that last section, there's a whole section of Psalms that are called the Psalms of Ascent. And I really like those because they were sung as worshipers were coming into Jerusalem and beginning to go up to the temple. They would sing these psalms, and they're really, really neat psalms. And then one of the verses from Psalm 145, verse 21, is the key verse here. My mouth will speak in praise of the Lord. Let every creature praise his holy name forever and ever. And I'm going to quickly mention why I really like those Psalms of Ascent. When I went to Israel, we went on an educational tour through my church. Our tour guides, when we were on the buses, we were coming into Jerusalem from a different part of Israel. And as we began to ascend, because Jerusalem sits in a higher elevation, as we began to ascend into Jerusalem without any warning, if you might say that, or indication of what our guides were going to do, on our bus they began, she just began reading the Psalms of Ascent. She began reading, I think it starts at Psalm 120. And as we were going through, we got to the point where they allow tourists to stop at what's called the Western Wall. And that's where she stopped reading. But oh my goodness, was it powerful. It was just absolutely a wonderful thing to envision thousands of years ago, Israelites coming for the holy festivals, for the times of worship, and ascending up into Jerusalem toward the temple and remembering to sing those specific psalms. To me, it's goosebumpy, and I use that word a lot when I'm describing how Scripture affects me. So let me pause again. We're going to pick up the other couple of books, and then we'll finish up this time together. Okay, next up we are looking at the book of Proverbs. Well, what's the book of Proverbs? It's little quotes, quips of wisdom. And we know that Solomon wrote the majority of these primarily to what I think was his son. And there were a few other people who put their Proverbs in there as well. It's dealing with wisdom. Now, why is this attributed to Solomon? Why do we put his quips in there, his quotes? Because if you know the story of Solomon, King Solomon, he's the son of David. He was the heir to the throne of Israel, and God gave him an option of a couple of different things that he could ask God for. And the big thing that he asked for was wisdom. He could have asked for wealth. He could have asked for any number of things, and he chose wisdom. And because he chose wisdom, God blessed him for that, and he had a very good reign. He also was the one that was able to build the temple of Israel. He made a couple of doozy errors along the way, but he still had a lot of wisdom. And it's taking place in Israel. When approximately 900 BC to 700 BC, if you'll notice, some of these dates, we're not going in chronological order. I'm just going how they are listed in your table of contents. Why was Proverbs written? Well, who doesn't need a word of wisdom here and there? As I said, it was written primarily to his son, or one of his sons, presumably the son that was going to be his heir. Um, it's written to provide wisdom and guidance for God's children. The chapter outlines, there are 31 chapters. A lot of times people will take a chapter a day for a month as their devotional reading or inspirational reading, and that's perfectly all right. A lot of people do that. There's also a section in there about the wise woman, which I think you women would find interesting. But chapters 1 to 9 just give us lessons in wisdom. In chapters 10 to 22, they're all the Proverbs of Solomon to his son, ways that he could live a better life, a more practical life, a wise life, righteous life, just all kinds of really good practical thoughts there. In chapters 23 and 24, there's some other wisdom sayings, probably from some other people along the way. In chapters 25 and 29, we have some more of Solomon's wise sayings. And then in chapters 30 and 31, there's some additional Proverbs. And I like the chapter 31. It deals with how a husband praises his wife and honors his wife in the city gates, what she does, how she contributes to her home, her community, how she contributes to the ways of their culture. I love it. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 has been used as a very good lesson in where do we put our trust, where do we put our understanding. It's not about us, it's about what God does in and through us. And those verses say this: trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Okay, that's the book of Proverbs. I'm going to pause once more, and then we're going to come back to the other book. Okay, moving right along. The next book is called Ecclesiastes, and it's where we get the word church from in Greek. In Greek, it's ecclesia, but it's all kinds of wisdom from the middle point or the end point of the life cycle. Solomon is the one pretty much attributed to being the author of Ecclesiastes. It's not definite, but it's pretty traditional that he's the one that wrote it. And if you look at the book of Proverbs and then the final book we're going to look at, it's the same similar style to what we find in all three books. That's why it's attributed to Solomon. Again, what is covered? There's more wisdom. When is this taking place? Approximately, well, there's quite a number of years here, but 900 thereabouts, or even as late as the 500s BC. And it's answering the question, how do I find truth? Where is truth? So it's a search to discover the truth. Now I say that this is kind of in the middle or the end of Solomon's life. We'll see how this plays out in just a minute when we finish up with the Song of Solomon. But we've got 12 chapters. In the first two chapters, Solomon is talking about the meaning of life. And if you are a Kansas fan, the music group Kansas, long time ago, they came out with a song that talks about to everything there is a season. And if you know that song, you're probably thinking it right in your head right now. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There's a season, turn, turn, turn. You get the point. So he's talking about what is the meaning of life. Then we go into chapters 3 through 6. And he's talking about life is not always fair. Just face it, it's not. And then in chapter 7 and 8, we have some more wisdom. Chapters 9 and 10, this is appropriate for today because it talks about no one knows the future. We have so much speculation out there today. We have so many people saying, this is what's going to happen. This is how this is going to play out. Well, they aren't the first ones to say that. But this is biblical. No one knows the future. And he goes into reasons why no one knows the future. Then the last two chapters deal with, as a lot of books deal with, obedience to God. Obedience to God brings blessings. Disobedience brings curses. And the consequences, the good consequences from obedience versus bad consequences of disobedience. Key verse from Ecclesiastes comes from chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. It says this, "Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil." All right, we're going to pause and we're going to come back and wrap up with the Song of Solomon. All right, we're going to wrap this video up with the Song of Solomon. Now, in a lot of your table of contents, it'll say Song of Songs because it's just one big, huge musical poem. The reason why I say that these three books that we just looked at are attributed to Solomon is because, and actually in the chronological way of things, Song of Solomon should come first. Then we have the book of Proverbs. Then we have the book of Ecclesiastes. And the reason why I think it should be reversed and chronological that way is because Song of Solomon takes place with Solomon as a young man, young king, young husband, young father. Mostly it's between husband and wife, okay, or beloved and the husband. All right, so we know that Solomon wrote, or we believe Solomon wrote these three books: Song of Solomon, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. Anyway, I was saying Song of Solomon deals with Solomon as a very young man, young king, and then we go into Proverbs, which is about the middle of his life, from when he becomes king, and he asks for wisdom, so he wants God to guide him. So he's in his prime during that time frame. And then we have Ecclesiastes, and from the very beginning of Ecclesiastes, we find out that this is toward the end of his life, and he's reflecting. So everything is meaningless or under the sun. So that's where we're at with that. Song of Solomon, there's a lot of controversy over whether or not this is alluding to God's relationship to Israel, or if it's relating from the New Testament perspective, Christ and his relationship with the church as the bride. I look at it as simply a love story. Who wrote it? Well, Solomon primarily. There were a few others, but it's a love poem. It's a love poem between a man and his beloved, whether or not it begins as his betrothal or into the early part of his marriage. But that's That's what I believe it to be. It's just a simple love poem. Where does this take place? It takes place in Jerusalem. That's where Solomon had his palace. He's king over Israel. When does this take place? Well, somewhere in between those years again of 900s to the 500s. And why is it written? Why is it written? Well, it's simply to illustrate the joy of authentic love found in marriage. Boy, do we need that in today's culture. Yes? So, go to the Song of Solomon. You can read more about that. Simply outlined for us in chapters 1 and 2, the courtship phase. We don't have courtship too much today in our culture, in the Western culture. But in that culture, there was a time frame called courtship. It's a good custom. It's a good tradition. Then we have the wedding, chapters 3 and 4, the wedding. And then secrets to a lasting relationship, chapters 5 through 8. You can find that. So if you want to do a study on marriage, Song of Solomon is a good one to go to. The Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verse 7 is where our key verse comes from. It says, many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot wash it away. If one were to give all the wealth of his house for love, it would be utterly scorned. Well, that concludes today's summaries. Next time we're going to go into the prophets and start doing the summaries of the prophets. So I hope that you're enjoying this. I hope that you're getting something out of it. Learning something new, maybe reviewing something that you haven't thought of for quite a while. But again, I'd like for you to hit the like button, share this. Stay tuned for the next time. And until then, have a good day and God bless you.